Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2. We are happy to have you back here. I'm going to invite Professor Nick to say a few words before we start our keynote.
Johanna, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I will not stay here for a very long an excellent speaker, someone who is very well known in Brazil, someone who knows Brazil also very well. Brazil knows him and he knows Brazil. Unfortunately, he's from another state. That's a big problem. He's from that state, that Minas Gerais state, somewhere in north here. But okay, we will accept it. He will be fine. So Eduardo is a professor at the Department of Economics of the Federal University of Minas Gerais, and he's also the director, or has been the director, of Centerplar. Okay, of Centerplar, which is most well-known actually academic institutes in Brazil, at least for work of the type that we are doing here. So without further ado, actually, I would like Eduardo to come here, to step to the podium, and he will give us a keynote on the regional and the international, and the keynote then we will have Professor Lee, Jeong-Dong Lee, to comment on this keynote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Nick, Bruno, people from this department. And I always learn a lot being here. So we'll talk about the title of the presentation. Bruno and Nick invite me to talk about regional innovation, ecosystems, and international connections. What I will do then is try to translate this question in the language of innovation systems, okay? So the question will be how international connections may be a tool for upgrading regional innovation systems. Look, Nick asked me to charge the roundtable that will follow this presentation. So probably I'm presenting a lot of questions for the next roundtable. That's okay. So I will invert the title of the presentation, because I will have a part 1 when I will talk about international connections, and a part 2 when I will try to discuss regional innovation systems and how they can use those international connections to upgrade. But the second part is more questions than answers. So it's a problem to be dealt in the next session. The research that I will present here involves lots of people that I have the privilege to collaborate from my department, from other institutions. And I would say that in 11 years ago, we may have done a conjecture. We were studying interaction between firms and universities, an international project that I had together with Keun and Glenda Cruz. So we were looking just for one of that rounds, a country. And we began to feel that there were lots of connections connecting different national systems of innovations. There are 4 countries, and you can see lots of connections between those different national innovation systems. So that the title of this presentation talks about something that we were beginning to feel, to sense in our empirical work. So we begin to look for those international connections. And basically, in the last 11 years, what we have been doing is just to search for those international connections. And then, that's what I will present here. Then at this search, we did find lots of connections, and then we discovered that those connections were growing. That growth of international connections was exponential. That it was a robust growth, and that was that led to self-organized networks, and therefore it should be forming new layers. This is important, new layers in international in innovation systems. Then, if those layers are so, if they were robust, self-organized, that they might be changing the innovation systems. And then we begin to talk about a formation of an international system of innovation. But then just to say that the formation of international system of innovation does not mean the end of the other levels. So we have a new hierarchy between the national level, the regional level, the local level, the sectoral level. So that's so we can, that's the question. Then in part 1, I will try to show empirical evidence and some theoretical discussion on this international dimension. And in part 2, make questions about how to think about this reconfiguration of innovation systems, and then the new policies that should be done in those previous existing, but still very important levels: local, regional, national, sectoral, and so on. So I will start, okay, international connection, but what connection? Then I will say that this presentation, this research has one problem, but it's a problem that is on our side. We underestimate the international dimension. I would highlight this. We underestimate in all sense. In the first underestimation is that we will deal with international, with which international connection? A knowledge flow. Looking to the literature, we have at least those 7 different knowledge flows. We can then go on and on discussing them. I would say, but we will look only for 3 of those knowledge flows. So we are, it's clear that there are more knowledge flows than those that we will investigate. Which knowledge flows we will investigate? First, knowledge flows for us will be part of the basic unit of analysis of our that we will present, an international knowledge link. What is an international knowledge link? International knowledge link is international knowledge flows connecting 2 institutions. Of course, institutions in different countries. So that's very important. All the empirical work that we will do is just to locate, identify these international knowledge links, and see how they, I would say, they self-organize. Yeah? We will discuss networks, as lots of presentations yesterday dealt with. And we will see process of self-organization of those networks. And those institutions that are in that are the beginning and the end of international knowledge flow, they can be firms, universities, they can be, therefore, the institutions that the literature on innovation systems deals. Okay, but we will then work on 3 types of international knowledge links. International type 1, international scientific collaboration, co-authorships in scientific papers, international co-authorships, for instance, a paper from researchers from the Chinese Academy of Science on one side of the international knowledge link, and Harvard University in the US in the other side. Second, cross-border patent citation of a patent. So we have, and again, yesterday there was a talk, Mateus talked about global innovation. So I'm not the first to talk about global innovation system here. He mentioned BioNTech. So BioNTech has a patent that cites a firm called Vical Incorporation in the US. This is an international knowledge link. And there is another, the third type, cross-border patent citation of a scientific paper. BioNTech in Germany will cite in its patent University of Texas, for instance. I will not, we can, as Bruno asked in the email, to explain how those networks were built. So I brought, now we can show, this is a scientific paper, the type 1, co-authorship. We go to the US patent and see, then look to BioNTech in the left, its patent, citing that is in blue there, a patent that is this patent. So from Vical, so we get this international link. And then we have BioNTech again. Oh, sorry, the patent was the first patent that list at the right. Now the paper, you see in blue, the paper cited in BioNTech patent, and this is the paper. So we went, okay, we have in our team a bright physicist that do this data work. So he prepares a robot that do this job of take the name of the paper in the patent, search the Web of Science, find the paper, and then take the institution of the authors and then check, are they in the same country? No. Then we have international knowledge point. So that's the, but this is, I prepare for, it's interesting because this is not, these are footnotes in the discussion papers that we are preparing. I think that we have to, this is, the international connection is not something abstract, something that's, it involves connections between people. That this is a suggestion of a research that could be done carefully. I did this just to take randomly, and I found those 2 examples. For instance, there is this patent that we quoted this in a previous paper that prepared the background for this research line. There is a patent from Microsoft that cites a patent from Sony. We looked for the name of the inventors, and you say, okay, nobody knows that. This has nothing to do. And then we discovered that the inventor of the Microsoft patent had an scientific paper together with the inventor of the Sony patent that he from Microsoft cited. So they knew each other, they worked together. So that's probably, and then, so face-to-face contacts between patent citing patent, and now probably a face-to-face contact between a patent that cites a paper. Look, we went to this Dutch firm, ASML, an inventor, Steven Hansen, that cited a paper, two papers in that patent. Those papers are from an international meeting. I can read here. It's proceedings of SPIE. So two papers from that proceeding, and Steven Hansen, had a paper also in that proceeding. So he was there. So he mentioned a paper that Susan mentioned the role of international meetings, casual meetings, and so on. So that meeting, two people meeting, the flow has some very, I would say, it's not uncodified knowledge, that probably there are tacit knowledge exchanged very carefully, but this is not just a comment I would say that this is I would like very much to do a careful research on this, because I only would say that this would be promising because I did that, just preparing a footnote for the paper, something to talk here, and I did find these things. So organized research would lead probably with, okay. So then that's the empirical basis for our networks. You know, now the graphic expression of those three layers, that's, you can see layer one, article collaboration, that each each dot is an institution. So the international knowledge link between co-authors in the first case, the international knowledge link, the patent citation, we will call layer number two, a firm citing another firm in the patent, and then this layer number three is a patent citing an article in scientific paper. So, but I would say that our research development in 2014, we prepare a paper discussing layer number three. In 2018, we prepare a paper discussing layer number one. In 2021, we published a paper about the layer number three. And then what we are doing now is to put all the three layers together, because we learned that those layers, they have a life of their own, they overlap, and they entangle. And we learn by the people studying networks that there is a root discussion on networks of networks. And by the way, in the paper, we mentioned that the shape of these networks that these three layers form is very peculiar. We would say that they are multiplex network of networks and asymmetric multiplex network of networks. But this is another, we can discuss this later. So now I will show date and date. Four tables. Let's go layer by layer. So what we are talking about. So the opening phrase in the discussion paper about these three layers is that we have, okay, I'll tell this later. So the first column, we have 4 years. Now we can think the development of this network over time. Look, the number of articles, 1,800,000 in 2009, 2,700,000 in 2017. With international collaboration is the second column, 576,000 in 2017. Then there are knowledge links, all links, 43,000, okay, because we have people, papers have more than one author, so we have collaboration in both sides, so there is a explosion of the number of international knowledge links. The number of links, and then our point, international knowledge links. In 2017, we had 15 million international knowledge links, almost 60 million in the first layer. So that's the, and then we can, the last column, the power law exponent, we have a physicist to get working with us. So is a property of the network, and we would say after Barabasi work on networks, that this network is not a random network. It's it follows power law conditions, which means that it's a complex network, it's self-organized, and so, wow, we are talking about something that is self-organized, it's robust. It's not just random connections, something more. Then the second layer, patents, patents with international citation, knowledge links, and international knowledge links. So we have, in 2017, 1,249,000 international knowledge links in the layer related to patent citations. Again, last column, this layer also follows power law, has power law properties. It's a network, it's not random, it's self-organized, and so on and so forth. And then we have the third layer. Okay, patents again, patents with international citation 15,000, international knowledge links 70,000. Again, this layer follows power law conditions, not random, and so on. And it's interesting, as we are looking for different E's, it is stable in the presentation of these power law properties. Over time, it preserves the. So, moving one step, then we try to see how many nodes, institutions, were in those layers. And then we see the first layer, 2017, we have 62,000 institutions. Looking for those institutions, they are mainly universities. There are firms that write papers, have international collaboration, and so on. But we would say that that layer is basically a university-led layer. Then we have the second layer. It is basically a firm-led layer. In 2017, we have 34,000 institutions, basically firms, citing other patents. And we have almost 200,000 institutions that are cited. So this is something that we have to investigate more later. And in the third layer, we have 4,000, around as 4,000 institutions citing and 10,000 cited. But now it's interesting because in this layer, the cited institution is basically university. So that we have 3 layers, but they are different, different properties from each of those layers. And then putting together all those 3 layers, we can follow the overlapping of those layers. Then we have look to the third line, 2-layer nodes. So there are lots of nodes, institutions that are in 2 different layers, is in layer 1 and layer 2. So the numbers are there. In 2017, we have 5,000 institutions that are in both, are at least in 2 layers. But then we go to the last lines, 3-layer nodes. Layers, that institutions that are in the 3 layers. The core of we call those institutions 365 institutions, as our processing abilities of this data so far enabled us. We have 365 institutions that are in the core because those institutions are in the 3 layers. They are in. So an idea of the number of the numbers of institutions, and we are investigating the, let's say I cannot and how the properties of their entanglement. And now just to look, who are the institutions that are in the core of those network of networks? Who are the 3-layer institutions? So this is very simple. I did this, not Leonardo. I just, he gave me the list of the institutions. I in Excel, I did a search for UNIV, and then I got that. So we have 365 institutions in the network of networks in 2017. 86 are universities, 2 were hospitals. So it's interesting because probably if we look for, there are more universities in the 3 layers than other institutions, given the size of the first layer. But in that, when you look for the overlapping and for the entanglement between these 3 layers, firms are the institutions that organize those 3 layers, that they are in the intersections. I think this is very interesting because it makes lots of sense. Looking for the literature on innovation systems that we know the basic institution of the innovation system, the base, not the unique, are firms. So firms are organizing those networks. So that's it. Then one step further, this is Leonardo prepared this. He investigated just the 3-node, the investigation of the network of networks. If we have 3 layers, each basic layer is a self-organized layer, then the question, the network resulting from the overlapping of those 3 layers, will it also be a self-organized network? The answer is yes. This graph shows that. He got the data from 2019 and 2017. We could put other years, and we see that both networks of networks also follows power law properties. In the paper, we will have a table with the exponents for each year, and all of them are in the range that shows that those networks are follows power law properties according, and then we go to Parabas and so on, and we can say that there are self-organized properties. So this makes us think that we have collected enough evidence to say that there is something new. There is those new layers are, if they are self-organized, if they are there. So we can talk now about international innovation systems with empirical data at our side. Again, we are underestimating the size and dimension of those international flows, as I said in the beginning, and so that's the point. So in this slide, I would like to just summarize a more theoretical paper that our team wrote. It was published in the Innovation Development in the last year. And it begins, so we try to organize our thinking. And by the way, all these reflections, empirical reflections that I present in the beginning are more or less the initial phrase. We have this idea of the process of formation of a global innovation system or global innovation systems. And we will look for evidence, so that the theoretical framework is more or less here. In the literature review, lots of them. We are not the first to talk about this. There is a good discussion on global innovation systems locally and so on. And we would like to highlight this paper from Beans and Truffer. By the way, Beans were mentioned by Vanessa in her presentation yesterday, because the Beans works with global innovation systems and clean energies. So lots of sense and lots of overlapping between us here. So they present this idea. I think it's very, I taken this here from their paper, and the idea of a suggestion to think about innovation system as multi-scale institutions. Then you see global, transnational, national, regional. When we read that, our team said, okay, so it's a bright idea about what's happening, and it solves a very important question. The emergence of innovation systems at the international level does not erase other levels. It basically, what's the point is that it's there is a new hierarchy that we should think of it. So that paper was in our literature review, and then we basically we went on trying to think about what are the deep forces that are shaping these international, the emergence of new layers in innovation systems. First, multinationals and their operation. Certainly all the discussion about global value chains and so on are part of a discussion of the formation of international innovation systems that go beyond our analysis. And again, that shows that we are underestimating what is the level of formation of international innovation system now. The second driving force is science that has an international drive by themselves. Right? It's not, science does not respect national borders since the beginning. And then new information and communication technologies as infrastructure for those knowledge flows. Remember that Marcia yesterday even mentioned that there are firms that are born global. So that's a consequence of the digitalization of the world and so on. Then we suggest a dynamics of innovation system, a tentative typology. I will summarize, but then the idea, once upon a time, it's not so long ago, we go back probably, we are talking about the world after the Industrial Revolution, and let's go to Freeman's initial ideas and so on. We are talking about a world where we have international systems of innovation and international connectors between them. Although each national system of innovation began with a previous and very important flow of international knowledge. Kun presented that for today. Remember his phases. Every that three regions in that he studied in the first case, all of them began with a strong international side, and then the regions are learning with other regions, and then there is a process that's how you do with that international knowledge that you begin to absorb. Some successful and not successful cases. But if we go back, we can show the international origins of national innovation systems. Just to talk about anyone think that the Industrial Revolution would be possible with the transfer of knowledge from India to Great Britain about what is cotton textiles? Impossible. So there is a big the first national system of innovation depended upon knowledge from elsewhere. Then we go to Germany. We know that, as Freeman would point in his 1982 paper, lots of knowledge flowing from UK to Germany, and then US. You remember Nathan Rosenberg talking about how the immigration towards the US began the foray. I remember a book from Rosenberg that's American Technology. There is a chapter that is US as an imitator, and then US as an innovator. The chapter on imitation comes before the chapter on innovation. So we can go this is just the beginning. But then once those national systems of innovation are formed, they have international connections. Then in the second phase, second stage, we see the national innovation system at the beginning of an international layer. The beginning, probably transnational, the emergence of multinational firms around the Second World War, their importance. Let's remember of the investigation from Stephen Heimer, beginning to discuss the multinational corporations and so on. And then stage 3, a consolidation of an international layer and a new hierarchy in innovation systems. We think that we are in this stage. And then probably there is an intensification of those international connections and probably a real global innovation system or something in the future. But then the point here is that and this is the point for the next session, we suggest that we have a new hierarchy in innovation systems, a new layer that reconfigures, thinking about complex systems. We have something new. If there is something new, we transform everything. Nothing is as before. So that's the, this new hierarchy, again, does not erase the other levels, but they create new roles for those other levels. So then I can conclude part 1. Just summarizing, now we search for international connections. There is a layer that we identified international layers that but the real international layers are broader than what we did find. This layer does not eliminate others, and more than new roles, we think that we have to look to new opportunities that the consolidation of those international layers offer. Of course, there are new challenges, but let's look to the opportunities and how to take advantage of them. Then the question for part 2 of this presentation. Having talked about international connections, now it's time to talk about regional innovation systems. So the question that I would offer is how regional innovation systems may take advantage of these new configurations. This is, I would say, Bruno Fischer suggests that I should take a look in the WIPO report 2019. They talk about global connections and hotspots, the regions that are strong in those networks. Thank you very much. I learned a lot. But I would suggest another, those hotspots are probably, they might be headquarters of those institutions that have three-layer, that are 3 layers. The point is to look to the regions that are not in that hotspots, how to become a hotspot, right? So how to take advantage of those new. So that's the point for part 2. This is just to say that it's not mad things thought in my department and with my friends, with Jorge Brito, that is from Universidade Federal Fluminense. But we have at least, no, this idea was accepted to be presented in this, in Dublin, in the 6th geography. It was a meeting of Ron and Susan areas, economic geography. So Leonardo Costa Ribeiro was there just 3 weeks ago, and he prepared a fantastic presentation. And I took this map from his presentation. So far I talked about international connections. It's that, the graphic expression, of course, it's they would be hierarchical, unequal, etc. But and now we will try to include the national regional systems in those international connections. I inverted his presentation. So this is your question. How regional systems can. The other is our research. How are those international connections? Now, your question, how to take advantage of these international connections. I'm on time. There are 4 more minutes. No one else is seeing this. I can time machine. Mateus? No? Okay. So I have 4 minutes. So the first question then, how to, would be very, I think I would say obvious things now, but okay. So a preliminary question is always include all levels of innovation systems in your consideration. Never forget that there is an international dimension. And that's an organized one, given everything that I talked before. And that gives a new meaning for each level of for each level. At this point, I would suggest that yesterday, Mariana Françoso, the first paper that was presented, she mentioned 137 regions in Brazil, 24 at center, 18 intermediate, and 95 at the periphery. I hope I am right. And so I would suggest that what Mariana presented yesterday could be the starting point to make these connections. I suspect that, for instance, São Paulo, né, as a region, certainly has institutions that are in layers 1 and 2. We don't have in Brazil institutions so far in 3-node institutions. And probably Recife also, Universidade Federal de Recife, but then the second, the regions that are in the intermediate level of Mariana's presentation, probably will not be even in the first or in the second layer. So to try to identify this is just a starting point probably to include these issues in the evaluations and so on. Those networks, why they are important? Because they have small world properties. I can just, with 2 or 3 steps, I can go anywhere in the world and get the knowledge that I need. Of course, the key issue, international connections, is just the first part. Remember, Juan yesterday presented his phases. Phase 1, learn. Learn is go to look for knowledge in the region and outside the region. So it's just the starting point. And then I reviewed the papers, and this is our paper in 2018. Leonardo, Marcia Rapini, who will be with you in the next session, Glenda Cruz, Leandro and I. And then there is something that would be useful for today. This is the first layer, the international collaboration in science. When you look for the countries, look to the graph. At the right of 60%, countries and the weight of international co-authorship in their national scientific production. Countries that has more than 60% of their papers as international, with international flows, all of them are low-income countries. So, which is, you think it's obvious, huh? If a country is beginning to prepare capabilities in science, they are sending people to study abroad, and then when they return, they will write papers with their colleagues, the supervisor, and so on. So that's yes, I'm just complete. So that's so international connections are very important to begin, to join the networks. This is basically, and then how to, I would say that the idea then is a climbing process, to join the networks, the international networks, and then try to be first 1 layer, then 2 layers, then 3 layers, to go up in the, because those layers, we need to internationalize more this core. It's not so international. The number of countries that are in the first layer is not all countries that are in the first. The number of countries in the network of networks is less than the number of countries in the first layer. So we internationalize the core is something very important. And concluding, the last thing that I will talk, global innovation systems, regional innovation systems, and we are in a world of global challenges. Health, global pandemic, climate change, those challenges only can be met by global institutions. So the consolidation of global innovation system as a political goal is important for those challenges. And of course, each of those challenges need lots of capabilities in each of the countries to just to monitor, follow emerging diseases or to deal with specificities of climate here and there. So there is this interaction between the local and the global is very important to answer our current challenge. That's it. So sorry for the time. Thank you for your attention, and that's it.
Thank you very much. This was a great presentation. Actually, this is exactly what's going on. I have questions, but we'll wait until later. First, we want the reaction of Professor Lee. John Lee is from the Seoul National University, advisor to the Korean president on science and technology, the Korean president, the previous presidency, the one that ended. So he will react to our.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the fantastic presentation, and I was amazed at the beauty of the storyline. I was really enjoyed it. And this is not my comment, but I just want to add some kind of word to improve the storyline. This is the summary of Eduardo's presentation. Internationalization of knowledge creation process, yes. And need to join the international knowledge network, yes. And importance of software capacity of the local innovation system, yes, we confirm. But here I wanted to remind you, and maybe some of you may remember the Thyssen's presentation 3 years ago here in this conference. And then after that, he published the one very interesting paper, localization, regionalization, and so on. And this paper focuses on UK, but when he presented here, he talks about the Brazilian case. You may remember. This is the I got from his presentation 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. This table shows the percentage of paper that published one university with industries within 50 kilometers, maybe less than 50 kilometers. So as you can see, top 10 world largest universities. Seoul National University takes the first position. And for example, about 60% of paper published by Seoul National University with industry. And in that case, the companies will locate within 50 kilometers from SNU campus. Do you know the secret? Samsung headquarters just about 1 hour away from SNU campus. And the second, University of Tokyo, and so on. So we cannot see the Brazilian universities. And this is the analysis for Brazilian universities. And you can see university campus. Only 9% of paper published together with the industry, and then the industry will locate within 50 kilometers, which means more than 9% of paper, co-authored by industry. In that case, the companies will locate more than 50 kilometers. And interestingly enough, for example, University of São Paulo, this ratio has decreased, which means the researchers in São Paulo works with the companies which locate further and further over time. And even you can see 5,000 kilometers away from University of São Paulo. What that means? It's a Silicon Valley. So more and more number of researchers of Brazilian top universities that try to work with global companies outside the local innovation system. That's the very interesting evidence showed us 3 years ago. And so we need to remind the concept of the linkage between knowing and doing. Knowing means knowledge, innovation, journal article, patents, and all the evidence we just saw from Eduardo's presentation, and linked with the global knowledge network. But if we look at the doing side, it's related with the production, service, export, employment, and so on. So everyday life. So this doing is closely related with the local value chains. And what about the relationship between this doing and knowing? So I presented also 3 years ago a paper here in this conference, and I published that one in structural change on the final revision in structural change in fluid dynamics. So this conference is the home of very beautiful papers. This is the diagram I put into the paper. So we have 2 spaces, doing space and also knowing space. So those 2 spaces are co-evolving. So for example, we are doing some industry, doing A, and by doing A, we can get some knowledge to support A. But knowledge A is very closely related with knowledge B. So by doing A industry, we can get knowledge A and B. And with that B, we can go or diversify into another doing activity, B. So for example, chip production by Samsung Electronics in 1980s and 90s. And by doing chip production, Samsung Electronics started to accumulate knowledge together with SNU. And then with that knowledge, for example, process knowledge has been utilized to create a new, totally new sectors, biosimilar sector. So from production to knowledge and to production, knowledge, and so on. So if we have those kind of co-evolution process, then we can diversify into 2 ways, in doing or in knowing. So I got some examples doing without knowing. So automobile production of Thailand. As Gunni already mentioned yesterday, Thailand is one of the production hubs of global automakers. So Thailand is producing 2.5 million cars a year, but all made by FDI companies, Sony, Ford, and so on. And if we check the patent to support automobile industry of Thailand, virtually nothing. They are producing 2.5 million cars a year in doing, but in knowing they doesn't have any international patent. And agriculture and mining sector in most developing countries, they are producing fruits and vegetables and so on, but without knowledge. And in this case, we run the risk of fail to upgrade and diversification. Stopped. And another side of the story, knowing without doing. Can you imagine the situations? Knowing without doing. We can publish many science and nature papers and also a list of beautiful patents, but without any productions that utilize that knowledge. Divergence between global knowledge and local production. That's what we are seeing in many middle-income countries, middle-income trapped countries. In this case, we can see many cases of brain drain and even degrading local production capabilities, because highly cited scholars doesn't care about the local productions. They wanted to work with the Silicon Valley and then Google and then so on. So it may even harmfully affect to local production capabilities. So this is my quick remedies. So first, we need to redefine the mission of local knowledge institute. For example, the top university's role should be redefined in some countries. Not only to work with global partners to generate beautiful papers, but their mission should be directed to work with local production sectors. This is the example. The LINK is a short name of a program. This is the project from 2012. And the individual universities can apply this program. And if they are selected, they can get the support from government. And the only mission is to work with local companies. And so number of companies that has been involved in this LINK program is more than 5,000 in a year. And licensing outcome out of this LINK program amounts to 40 million per year. So knowledge generation capability of the university has been closely linked with local production capabilities and can make some outcomes. And also, we need a very strong extension centers to not only to generate the knowledge, but also to diffuse the knowledge to local production sectors. Thank you.
Have a little discussion.
Okay, so these two intervention very interesting because we are getting into the important issue of this internationalization versus localization. How we can balance these two over time, over the different stage of development. So although international connection is important, we should be connected internationally, but eventually, as Jeong-Dong mentioned, we got to create some local basis for knowledge creation and also, as mentioned, ownership. So I have a separate research on the regional university system using data of 30 cities around the world. And eventually, we must be surprising to know that like Silicon Valley show lowest degree of international sourcing in terms of relatives. They do more locally. Whereas latecomer country like Bangalore, even Sao Paulo, show high degree of international sourcing. They rely on all foreign sources. So that means that we start from international connection. That's important. We got to learn from outside. But eventual goal is we got to create more something local. That's not easy and that's difficult. So if you keep relying on the MNCs, if you just keep doing that, then that's not a solution in the long-term sense. So as I mentioned, case of Penang, they keep relying on MNCs. So they are tend to be slow in catching up, whereas Shenzhen rely heavily on the international FDI MNC, but eventually they create a local company. And that's also local knowledge sourcing and so on. So I don't know, this might be one general observation about the long-term, the path of this, how to manage local global intersection in terms of over the course of economic development.
Thank you. But I would like to stress three things. First, I'm not drawing political conclusions of my, this is the test of the next roundtable, and I think that that's this discussion. My goal in the presentation is only one. I'm doing just, let's say, an anatomical work. I'm just looking for something that exists and trying to show that it exists. So that the idea is to show that there is what I would like to listen. If you believe now, after my presentation, that there are two layers that we have international layers. They exist. Point. That is what I would like to do. Yes, I'm very happy. That's it. I'm not saying that we have to, of course, so important that we have a round table. But my message for the next round table is, please always think that there is an international, those international layers, they exist. And how you, at the local level, you take advantage of this, that's your question. That's the first. Second, I would say that if I think that Silicon Valley is strongly internationally connected. I would say because if I take the list of these three nodes, your university, your PhD from California, University of California is not only in general, but University of California, Los Angeles, they all are links. They all are three layer nodes. Stanford University is 3 layer nodes, and if, the number of even small firms, not IBM and so on, that are in those 3 layer nodes is very important. So Silicon Valley is strongly internationally connected. It brings people from the, you know better than me, look to the works from Saxenian about how the migration of people from all the world to Silicon Valley is part of the strength of that part. So then I would say that too. But of course, one thing is because the leading institutions, if I put in the screen, the leading institutions in those 3 layer nodes are IBM, Samsung, They are in all the layers and very well. So to be there is very important. They, who are there? So that's the point. So that's the, we should not underestimate, I would say, which country benefits more from their international connections. United States of America. What is the change if we compare the lead institution in 2009 and 2017? What is the biggest change in the lists? You guess. The role of institutions from China. China is growing, universities, Huawei, firms, and so on. So to be, I suspect that to be in that network of networks is something very important for the capabilities of firms, for the capacity of universities, and so on. Of course, I'm not in some. I'm not suggesting to forget on the contrary, the local, the regional, the national levels, and so on. But there is something new that we should take in account. Point. It's very simple. What to do with that? The question of the next roundtable, and I think that Professor Lee made a fantastic introduction.
Yeah, hello. I have thanks for the presentation. I very much like the idea. I have two questions. The first is, how do you account for the multi-locality of inventors and scientists? Because we have a few examples here of professors having multiple affiliation, not in one country, but in many. And these are potential connections as well. And then the second question is, I was wondering, what is the evolution of these what is the evolutionary aspect of these networks? Can you say something, so do you first have such that you have meetings and then they become stated? Is that maybe a typical, let's say, international cooperation? Because I think you could investigate that based on data.
If I listen well, the second part, the second question is the evolutionary aspects of the network over long term. Yes, okay. Let's. So the first, how we count the location. In patents, by the patent assignee, so it's just one. And as I said, we are underestimating the internationalization of flows. For instance, there is one patent. One patent that we have something that is connected with the global pipelines that you mentioned. There is a Canadian firm that has, I think it's Bombardier, that developed something in China, and then there is a patent from Bombardier. The assignee is Bombardier, Canada, but the inventors are in China. This is clearly an international knowledge flow, but we do not count that so far. So we are underestimating the size of. Thank you for the question. And for instance, co-authorship. There is I saw a paper that co-authored by General Electric in Beijing with a university from Beijing. Therefore, General Electric. But we do not count that paper because both authors are in the next phase. We have to take in consideration that there is a subsidiary there, and that would be clearly an international. There is an international body. So again, we are underestimating the evolutionary trends. We are just beginning to this data. We conclude this data analysis last month. So we're beginning to think about. What I think that we can say that the trend, I would say, is it's growth of those layers. It's an exponential growth. You can see looking year after year, each of those layers. We would like to look more for the rules over time of the entanglement between the three networks. And it seems that the network is becoming more entangled. It's interesting because we are talking about international knowledge flows, but the network of networks is not so internationalized. If you look for which firms are there, which universities are there. So one thing that we could see is that the network of networks in 2009 was less internationalized than 2007. So it's beginning to. I think that China was not in 2009, and it was in 2017. One example. Other countries probably. So that's the very basic. And it's very important to just a last phrase. Once conclude. Look into the network of networks to find that these network of networks over time preserve power law properties. That is for us, our group, we are very happy to find this, and it's something that shows that it's here to stay. So that's why we can say my last word. Please never forget to include the international dimension and the consolidation of an international system of innovation in the third stage of our analysis, in your analysis of local, because of course the local is the key for everything. Thank you for your attention.
You want?
So knowledge and production has the relationship with just like a soul and body. Human cannot live without soul and without body. And I'm really worried about the situation of great thinker's mind in children's body. So it might be a very harmful situation. And there, in terms of co-evolution, there are hostile relationship, just like a host and parasite. But production and knowledge may have mutually beneficial relationship between, just like a butterfly and flower. So butterfly cannot live without flower, and vice versa. So I wanted to emphasize that again.
Thank you very much. I think we will conclude. Thank you both. And obviously this discussion will continue with the roundtable. Let's go for a break.
Okay, so now we're back for the last session of our day in Campinas with a roundtable about policy relevance for regional ecosystems. For that, I invite Professor Nick Vonortas to be the moderator of this discussion. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Johanna. This is a closing session of this first 2 days. We have tomorrow another day, São Paulo, the University of São Paulo, but we are concluding today. And I thought, we thought actually the organizing committee thought that given that we have big personalities here, a round table, bringing them all basically here in front and having them make their own statements and then have an open discussion with the people in the room, but also people online would be a good way to close this. So, I want to call then our distinguished Paulo Zawislak. Paulo Zawislak is at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. He is leading for well, many years now, at least a couple of decades, a very active research institute that is called NITEC, which deals with innovation. He's the author of many papers, and actually he has produced and he's developing a very interesting methodology on firm level innovation. The second invitee is Professor Keun Lee. Keun Lee is, as you heard already, professor at the Seoul National University in Korea. He was heading the Council of Economic Advisors of the president of Korea, the one that exited about a month ago. We will have Professor Ron Boschma from Ron is a professor at the University of Utrecht, but he is, like Susan was saying earlier today, he is one of those people who have many different jobs. So he has a job in Norway, professor. He has a job in France, another professorship in Toulouse. Those of you who do not know, Toulouse is one of the primary areas of street major. We will also have on this panel Professor Lee, Jeong-Dong Lee, the one who just commented on Eduardo's paper, but Professor Lee is currently a sign of our times. He is taking a PCR test to go back to his country. So he will come in a few minutes after the test. We also have Professor Marcia Rapini. Marcia is online. We see her there. Hi, Marcia. Yeah, Marcia Rapini is a colleague actually of Eduardo Albuquerque, who gave us a keynote just few minutes ago. She's also at the Federal University of Minas Gerais, actually in the same group as Eduardo. She's at CEDEMPLAR, that is the Department of Economics, correct? Right. And then finally, we have the gentleman there on the right of the screen, the one that we saw yesterday as well. He was commenting on a keynote. And this is Otaviano Canuto. Otaviano is joining us from Washington, DC. I said yesterday he has many accolades, highest positions, IMF, World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, professor here in this university some time ago, professor at the University of São Paulo, whatever, and Vice Minister of Brazil. So he did that also. He was in Brazil. So he's not as old as he should be, actually. after all these jobs, I would expect somebody to be 200 years old, but he's not. He managed to do all this in a short time period. So Otaviano is joining us online. What I will be doing here is we will open this and I will ask the people on the panel to make a comment. So they will have a statement, no more than 10 minutes each. And then at the end of the statements, we will open it up for discussion. We have 2 full hours for this, so I hope we will have an interesting discussion here. Okay, so let me start then with Paulo. Paulo Zawislak.
It's a round table. I think it's better. You allow me to take off the mask. I always forget using that mask because every elsewhere we are not using anymore. So thank you, Nick, for the opportunity. It's an incredible roundtable. It was a almost 2-day, very, very interesting discussion, and obviously lead us to some insights. When Nick invited me to this roundtable and to participate in a sort of a closing moment of these 2 first days, of course, the idea of discussing policy and ecosystems and innovation refers much more to some, after all, the contribution such a discussion is doing here. In terms of, well, okay, we know a lot of things, but what can we do with all those things? As Nick, when he presented me, he has pointed, I'm leading a research group after like 10 to 15 years where we discuss much more on the micro level. It's the firm level, is corporate innovation and capabilities, innovation capabilities. So the very question, and now we are discussing a lot, and Porto Alegre, the city where I come from, is looking forward to become a sort of smart city, a hub of innovation, role known as a city of novelty and so on. And obviously the thing that is most being discussed down there is ecosystems. So we have very good universities, we have new ventures, we miss a little bit of financing, we have discussed that, but we may manage. It's just the moment you talk about money, it is already, you cannot talk money. You cannot talk money. You cannot talk money. So the mic goes off. Where I was in, well, ecosystems and universities and new ventures and a little capital for venture capitals, and obviously companies. What I have been asking myself, and we have been asking our group, is a little bit on what are the capabilities for ecosystem relations. It's not just a matter of having 2 or 3 companies or 20 or 30 companies or 200 or 30 companies. If they are, as a matter of fact, if you take our corner back in the very south of Brazil, Porto Alegre and Rio Grande do Sul, we have a lot of companies. We have metal mechanics, footwear, textiles, and obviously agribusiness and food and so on. But those are not companies that are attached to an ecosystemic way of seeing business. This is a little bit what we are trying to understand. If you, in one hand, we take the very definition of an ecosystem of innovation, it is obviously based on relations. I won't stress this. I won't stress the digital revolution we are living, the changing on behaviors and so on. There were a lot of presentations since now that were already pointing to that direction. But what I would like to say is that when we look to an ecosystem of innovation ecosystem, we look to a batch of relations. This is the very core of a functioning ecosystem. You cannot decide that tomorrow Porto Alegre will be a city with a working ecosystem. If, for example, we don't have, let's just take one of the presentations yesterday. I don't remember who it was at this moment. I took pictures of that, but you have like double helixes, triple helix, quadruple helices, those things that do not happen by chance or by a government decision. What we have trying to understand is that where is the very basic unit of an ecosystem? And in our point of view is the simple peer-to-peer interaction. And this is something that we lack a lot in Brazil. Let's take, for instance, university and industry interactions. Of course there is. We love to take some study cases and make a paper to tell. If you look profoundly to that, it's quite rare in the Brazilian current economic arrangement, and thus we don't have, or by don't having this kind of relations, it is very hard to fulfill the task of building an ecosystem. So what we have done, that we are lucky to have a very interesting database on innovation capabilities on companies. It's now more than 2,000 companies that we are arranged in a data system. And we have several questions, but we have one specific question that asks if the company interacts or not. And we took only a part of that data, and we asked, we went to look to the answer. Less than 20% of the data was the sample was 1,300 companies that we used to this, and only less than 20% of those companies have any kind, but something with universities. So this is something that 80% of the companies do not interact. So what we did, we went to look how was the innovation capabilities configuration of the companies that interact and the companies that do not interact. And this is something that I think can lead not all innovation policy towards ecosystems, but at least give some clues on what kind of things an innovation policy looking forward to establish ecosystems of innovation should have in mind in terms of understanding the way companies work. What we use a model of capabilities that divide all companies in four different dimensions: development, operations, management, and transactions. Those are the four major innovation capabilities of any company. Of course, there are companies that do not develop anything, so they don't have development. Others that are very weak on transactions, marketing and so on, and management and operations. Brazilian companies are very operations oriented. Very good. Eduardo just showed us that the companies you know how to do, but you don't know. No, it was. Okay, sorry about it. You know how you say that. But the doing, yeah, you know how to do, but you don't know. You don't know. Yeah, that's a. So this is a very interesting point, and I will close my 10 minutes. That I hope it was all. I'm still tired. 1 minute. Okay, that's perfect. By saying that when we look to the configuration of capabilities on the interacting companies, they are very development and transaction oriented. When you look to the capabilities of the non-interacting companies, they are operations and management. So non-interacting companies, this is obvious what I would say, but we have to take this kind of analysis in mind to decide the policy. The non-interacting companies are looking, And they are trying to solve their problems through traditional efficiency management solutions. This is why management is so important to those companies. But interacting companies, every company is a bunch of bounded capabilities. No one is strong enough to have a best bunch of capabilities in the world. So if you have bounded capabilities, you need something to be complemented to those. So those interacting companies, they are supposing that they are looking outside. And to look outside, you need much more of a transaction capability than management capability. So with this in mind, we are imagining that, well, companies that want to interact must focus on development and transaction. Perfect. But the very question is that in an ecosystemic point of view, are the other stakeholders, for example, the university, ready to interact with companies focused on development and transaction? Because in our experience, at least in Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, a very research-oriented, scientific research-oriented, we are not aware of transaction capability. So it is very difficult to interact. So if you don't interact, even having companies that want and have the capabilities for, if you don't interact, you don't have the very basic unit of measure of every ecosystem. By not having interactions is not only a matter of deciding if we will have or not a let's say from tomorrow. So before deciding on the macro level and even in the meso level, it is absolutely necessary to understand the micro level. Is it possible to have these relations, systemic relations? In our opinion, with our data, development capability and transaction capability together could be called something as ecosystemic capability. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Paulo. Which identifies a major actually weakness in the science of economics. This correspondence of micro and macro. We have microeconomics, we have macroeconomics, but they are doing basically different things. I don't know how they are communicating. Okay, let me go further. Professor Keun Lee.
Thank you. I must first say that I made the right choice of coming to this meeting because I have to fly more than 24 hours of airplane trip 2 times. But I realized that I'm learning a lot, and I feel glad to have this kind of intellectual discussion. And especially the topic of our meeting is very timely and exciting. In other words, from local to global. And this is most important issues facing economic growth and catching up in the global south. But the other day, I was discussing with Nick whether which one is correct, from local to global or from global to local. Okay. Anyway, this local global interface is most delicate and important dimension we have to manage well strategically, and that determines our economic fortune. And in doing so, also there is a diverse dimension, like we can discuss that interface at national level or NIC level, or city or regional level, that's called RIS, and also sectoral level, sectoral system. So we can combine this local global interface with the 3 dimensions of innovation system, and that's that can be our big framework. Okay. Also, you have to manage this interface over the time or over the stage of development dynamically. Okay. Also, you have to some balance between these 2 elements: how much should be local, how much should be global or international, and then that's tricky issue. And we are learning a lot on this issue by today's discussion. Okay, So from the global south perspective, we all have a common start. In other words, we don't have much local knowledge basis. That's how we all starting from learning from outside world in the form of FDI or reliance on foreign knowledges. Eventually, our task should be generating something more locally. And that's the beginning of the catching up. Then at the final stage, we have to open again. In other words, based on our local knowledge basis and production basis, we have to be global again. So I think this is very dynamic or non-linear process. So starting from international alliance, sourcing, then building something locally, then open the again. This is what I call in, out, in framework in terms of GVC participation. You got to join GVC. We got to create out of GVC participation. We got to learn to create something more local value added, local value chain. Then we got to be open again. So this is what is coming to my mind more firmly throughout this today's event. Okay. Also, I didn't talk about my ongoing research using this data of over 30 cities regional around the world. And I'm trying to identify what are the RIS of mature countries, cities, or RIS of catching up RIS, because in the literature they said peripheral RIS characterized by heavy reliance on foreign knowledges. Then I'm finding that main attribute of catching up RIS is that reducing the reliance, building more local knowledge bases. Okay, so like a Silicon Valley, you must say that Silicon Valley, of course, highly open up, globalized. But in terms of relative degree, Silicon Valley shows lowest degree of reliance on foreign knowledges. Okay, although in absolute terms they must be very open, but in relative terms, between how much they are relying on foreign knowledge versus how much relying locally and from other regions in the US, they are showing highest degree of local knowledge creation and ownership. Whereas Bangalore, of course, well opened up, okay, but they rely on all foreign knowledges in their innovation activities and all foreign owned. That's good, but also limitation. Okay. Whereas if you go to Shenzhen or Taipei, Seoul, they are increasingly relying on more local knowledge, local creation, local ownership. So I just see this very important dynamic pattern of upgrading or catching up. And I see there are connection between local diffusion creation and local ownership. You know, without ownership, you'll be end up still citing foreign knowledges and relying on foreign knowledge. So there is a connection between ownership and localization of knowledge creation diffusion. Also diversification. In the diversification degree, technical diversification, Silicon Valley highly diversified. But Bangalore and other low-income cities less diversified, because your specialization dictated by MNCs. MNC said you got to specialize only this narrow segment. Only with your local ownership initiative, you will be feel more free to diversify in diverse areas. So I think there are some connection between ownership, local creation knowledges, and diversification. Another aspect is that, as mentioned by my case of this Malaysian auto sector versus China, you got to be target foreign market, global market. That's why you got discipline, competition. Otherwise, if you target only local market, you'll be less exposed to market forces of globalization. So that's the case of why Malaysia failed, despite local ownership auto industry. They didn't let them subject to market forces, discipline from market. Big businesses. We all starting from small. Eventually, we got to scale up to make big businesses. Big business needed to break up into high-end segment and generate more competition powers against incumbent. Just with the SME startup, you cannot break chain of global competition. So I would say the one needed in global startups is that export-oriented, locally owned, and big businesses. That's the thing you need to break up the middle income trap and join high income status. Okay, so that's the my recognition, my recent research, also from yesterday's discussion. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. What I would like to do is reflect a bit more on the type of policies that have been implemented in the European Union. Of course, this is very much a global conference, right? We talk about experiences in very different parts of the world. I'm always amazed by the fact that we try to apply the same type of tools and indicators wherever you are in the world. I was also trained as an economic geographer, right? So, and I know that places differ very much to each other. So sometimes and it also applies to my own work. I'm guilty as, I plead guilty here as well. Sometimes I think we should account a bit more for the institutional contexts that are around in the very different parts of the world, and therefore the type of games that are played, the type of interactions that might happen or not, are very much dependent on the particular types of institutions that are around. So that's why I prefer to talk about the European context that I know well, and the smart specialization policy framework more in particular. Just a bit about smart specialization policy. I love the principles on which it is based. And from a theoretical perspective, I like it a lot. It's a place-based policy. Point of departure is that there are capabilities that you build on, and you try to exploit those while moving into new directions. So that is the objective of smart specialization policy, to put it simply. That means this is not a one-size-fits-all policy, right? We all love that, and we think it makes sense to be very specific on what type of regional context you talk about and what kind of opportunities are there. And that differs very much from one region to another. And then last but not least, also in smart specialization policy here, it was already mentioned in the keynote, it is very important to have also international linkages or interregional linkages more in general in order to capture externalities that might be around elsewhere that you might still benefit from. So that's all part of smart specialization policy, and therefore I love the concept. Now the practice, right? And the way it has been designed and implemented. It's already around for a number of years now, not too long. I mean, it's all started in 2014 formally, but most countries started to implement it in the years 2016 and 2017 and onwards. What's nice about it is this program has been extended also in a new programming period in the European Union from 2021 to 2027. So it's nice that there is a kind of long-term commitment to this type of policy. Okay, so far the good news. Now about the evaluations that have been done so far, and I just name a few. There are more than 200 different smart specialization strategies in Europe, right? Each region can come up with a proposal. They have to follow the guideline of smart specialization policy. And then they might set priorities based on the capabilities that they have. Okay, first outcome. Most regions set very broad priorities. So they do not really make choices. They want to focus on ICT more in general, which of course we know is very broadly defined. It includes many different types of activities. So most of the regions, they do not really make a choice. Although that differs very much from region to region. Some regions are really doing a serious job in setting those priorities, while others, they just include very broad priorities. Second conclusion so far is this program is meant to make also crossovers across sectors, because that might trigger learning and innovation, etc., etc. The notion of relatedness that I work on is very much part of that. But if we look at in practice what type of priorities is set, it's hardly accounted for in any of the smart specialization strategy. And to be honest, I don't blame the policymakers, because it's also hard to do. And if you don't provide any guidelines how to do that and how to implement that in your program, then of course there's not much to be expected. Third conclusion so far is that not many regions actually target activities in which they have a potential. We have done some studies on that, but not only us, but also other colleagues in Europe, and that is one of the main conclusions so far. The type of priority set is not really matched, but the type of capabilities that they have in the region, and this was something what the smart specialization policy was supposed to avoid, right? That you don't go for the usual suspects, but that you make it tailor-made and you gear all actions toward the specific capabilities that you have in the region. Fourth conclusion so far, there's hardly any explicit focus on making connections to other regions, right? So the main focus is on the capabilities that regions have themselves, but there are hardly any initiatives to account for international languages linkages or to exploit those. Other conclusion, of course, it is what smart specialization policy is trying to do is to induce structural change in regions, and as we know, that takes a lot of time. It's a long-term goal, right? So it's far too early to tell if smart specialization policies have actually succeeded to make changes in their economic and industrial and technological structures. We cannot make an assessment right now, and this is a long-term commitment that regions have to make in order to see changes that might only become visible in maybe 10 or 15 years from now. Other conclusions from policy evaluation so far is, and it's also put into a question, do all regions have the institutional capacity to implement a smart specialization policy? Because the latest insights from political science and policy studies are included, right? Like trial and error, experimentation, etc., etc. And it is not always clear to policymakers what that actually means, let alone that they know how to implement that in an effective way. So here you go, not very optimistic about that. To what extent policy will deliver. And we know that regions differ tremendously in terms of the institutional capacity, right? There's a nice data set in Europe that actually measures the quality of government in European regions. It's an index that consists of many variables, including corruption, including the type of the perceptions that the local citizens have in terms of the quality of the public services that are provided. So are they happy with that or not? So you get a nice score of low quality of government, a high quality of government, and what to expect in a region where you have very low quality of government. Will they be capable of having an effective smart specialization policy that is actually a decentralized policy framework? This has been referred to as the entrepreneurial discovery process by Dominique Faure and others. Very decentralized. All local stakeholders are supposed to be part of that, to come up with initiatives, propose new initiatives. But that also means that there should be institutional capacity. to make that happen. And we actually observe that if you go from region to region in Europe, there are huge differences across Europe in that respect. A last point I would like to make is that smart specialization policy might not work for all regions in Europe. And I'm especially concerned with the more peripheral regions, the more backward regions in Europe, because the type of concepts that are made part and parcel of smart specialization policy is actually not very useful for them to pursue an effective smart specialization policy. That might have to do with the fact that they might have low capabilities, a low absorptive capacity of firms, heavily depending on external linkages. It has been said before in this conference, and those might require other types of policies in order to help them. But there might also be very good reasons for why they're peripheral, because they have to do everything against all odds. There are many features that are not very helpful to promote long-term economic developments in those particular regional settings. And I'm not so sure to what extent smart specialization policy is really helpful in order to overcome those problems. Okay, before you all start to cry and you become hopeless, I leave it to that. And
thank you. Thank you, Ron. We'll go a little bit online now. Marcia Rapini from Minas Gerais. Marcia, are you in Belo Horizonte, right?
Yes. Are you listening to me? It's okay?
Yes.
Nick, I have a presentation. I don't know if I'm the... Yes?
Wait a minute.
Firstly, I would like to thank you, Nick, Professor Bruno Fischer, and Professor Ron for the invitation to be with you.
Professor Marcia, you can just share your screen. You should
okay,
have.
Thank you. It's okay?
Yeah, okay. Okay, we see.
Okay. It's just
put it in presentation mode, please.
It's already in presentation?
No.
No? For me, is not yet.
I think you might be sharing the wrong screen. Try sharing again.
Okay. Stop sharing. It's okay now?
No, it isn't. Yeah. Try. No, you're not using two screens, are you?
No.
No.
Marcia,
okay. Put it in presentation mode first, and then share the screen where it's
Otaviano.
at the bottom, you have there on the page on how to make it full screen.
Well, eu tenho que escolher o PowerPoint, não é isso?
Isso, põe o PowerPoint, põe para apresentar primeiro.
Ah, tá bom.
E aí,
tá
quando
bom.
você for dar o share screen, você seleciona a tela da apresentação, porque a gente estava vendo a do PowerPoint.
Entendi,
Todas as funções.
É, mas aí eu perco vocês, entendeu?
Aqui nós estamos vendo a do PowerPoint nesse momento. It's okay. Marcia, pode tocar, pode fazer assim, não tem problema.
Eu posso colocar em PDF e talvez o professor Otaviano possa começar? O que vocês acham?
Não, pode continuar, não tem problema. Que a gente consegue ver legal.
Então... ver se eu fecho aqui, né? Tá melhor assim?
It's better. It's more readable.
Okay.
Tá melhor, sim. Pode.
So, thank you again for the invitation. Unfortunately, I was not able to be with you because of some previous compromise in university. Well, I'm gonna show some data looking at the Brazilian case. Global value chain could be an opportunity to foster regional productive diversification, and one of these possibilities would be through multinational companies' cooperation with universities. And so in this way, our idea is that the Brazilian universities could act as an antenna. So they established connections with the international flow of science and technology, and also with multinational firms, bringing knowledge to the local. And I'm going to show data from 7 years ago from Brazil, because we do not have more recent data. But I think it will be interesting to show how was this scenario and what should be done in the future. So the database is university engagement with subsidiaries of multinational in Brazilian regions. The data is from CNPq 2016 census. The limitation is that database does not reflect the set of all university firms cooperation, but it allows us to identify the actors at the level of municipalities. Most collaborations are academic or between universities and research institute. So the academic collaborations in this database represents 21% of total partners and 68% of total interactions. This database, international collaborations are with hospitals, universities, and research institutes, but they are underrepresented because they're not the purpose of the questionnaire. In this database, 80% of total research groups interact with universities and research institute located in 71 cities abroad from 60 countries. So they are internationally connected. This is a map of this academic and scientific connection. So in Brazil, research groups interact more with European countries and United States, but there are also connections in Latin America and Australia and so. And looking to the engagement with subsidiaries of multinationals, there are, this is the number of interactions, 4,053 subsidiaries located in 165 cities and with 643 research groups located in 1,020 cities. So this is the distribution of multinational firms. I don't know if you're seeing, but the multinational are obviously located in the south and southeast regions that are the more industrialized and more sophisticated with more value added. But the universities and research institutes are more dispersed in other regions. So we have groups in north, northeast, and other regions. So we can say that the multinationals are cooperating with groups from different regions, not from the ones in the south and southeast. Another informations, the majority of the engagements are in engineering and agrarian sciences, similar to the national pattern. Looking in engineering, the most important areas are mechanical engineering, electrical, metallurgical, and material. So maybe we can say that these interactions maybe are related to solve productive activities. And the type of interactions comparing the subsidiaries of multinationals and national firms, we see that in relative terms, the multinationals do more or look or search for universities to do more long-term scientific research and also long-term, short-term scientific research, but they are also engaged in technology transfer, in training, and consulting and engineering services. So they look for universities for different purpose and different objectives, one being more sophisticated knowledge flow, other are more not sophisticated, more simple. And this is the number of interactions between universities and subsidiaries of multinationals. This is in municipality scale, so we can see that multinationals that are located in the south and southeast region are connecting with universities from different parts of Brazil. And these are the same data from state level. So we can see that the majority of the Brazilian states are participating in this connections with multinationals, and this is by regions. Of course, we have a more intense flow of knowledges between the more industrialized regions. So some conclusions. Universities are spread through the Brazilian territory, and the COVID shows that universities are important actors in our national innovation systems, and they are capable of responding to this technological innovation and social demand that have been imposed by COVID. And some of our works also shows that universities were able to reposition their role based on policy and government induction. Universities have the potential to organize interactions between knowledge systems and collective actors in different ways to facilitate and to foster learning and innovation process. So university can act as a fulcrum devices maybe indicating the path for technological development of the regions. They could be a channel to technological and capacity upgrading of national local firms, but also they could be a source of knowledge flow to other local partners, non-firms like government, third sectors, associations, and foundations that are located in these regions. But the promotion of cooperation networks between universities and national and multinational firms must go hand in hand with productive technological upscale of less developed regions, so that the flow of knowledges stay in the region and are not drained to the south and southeast region. And that's the picture. This is university engagement with all firms, not only with multinationals. And what we can see is that the knowledge and the scientific capacity of universities from North and Northeast regions are being used by firms from other regions, as there is not, as in the region, there are not firms capable of absorbing and using this knowledge. So, and another important reflections is that some universities may be hubs in global knowledge flows, knowledge networks, while others could be hubs in national and regional development network. So they need different policies. And regional policy has to foster innovation and capacity building with productive structural change and productive diversification, especially in the peripheral regions, in Brazil, the North and Northeast, not to avoid this drawn of resources. And these policies definitely requires an ability to coordinate different policies and different actors. So this is some data that I would like to present to share with you. And I'd like to thank Alexandre and Leonardo for the help with all the maps. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Marcia. You identified this problem, which is perennial and for all countries, right? The United States has been struggling with this. Where I live, has been trying to. It has a great ecosystem biotech, but it could have much more. I think that
Nikki, we are not hearing you.
Yeah, it's cutting.
The thing that happening is that there is a black hole in the country. There is a black hole that sucks everything in. While the black hole is Silicon Valley, California. But the region builds companies, and the companies grow. Many of them on public funds. They get a lot of support and a lot of finance and a lot of other help. And the minute they can access private sector, private funding, they're gone. So this has been a struggle, and I know Korea also has an issue with that with Seoul, right? So Brazil is not alone, basically. That's what I wanted to say. Okay, so let's move forward to Otaviano. Otaviano.
All right. Thank you, Nick, for having me here and in such a good company. As we are approaching the policy relevance for regional ecosystems, and picking back on what Professor Keun said, I thought of bringing in more from global to local, addressing three of the topics that you suggested in the program, namely the GVC reorganization in developing countries, issues for regional development, and some words about policies. Now, in the case of the global value chain reorganization and the place for developing countries, well, we are living through really very extraordinary times. And they will have, and the events that have happened in the world, in the global economy, since the beginning of the year, in the last few years, will bring enduring consequence. I'm referring to the multiple shocks, to the overlapping shocks that have changed dramatically the environment of operation of global value chains, with implications in terms of their reorganization. It's really a perfect storm, almost a storm with biblical or almost apocalyptical combination. Let's see. First, we have a plague. We have the pandemic that is still ongoing, and which brought, as we saw, particularly last year and still on, supply chain disruptions. This has made a change, provoked a change in the approach and on the discussion about global value chains, as the topic of resilience and national security have come to the fore. Of course, one has to take into account not the discrepancy in some cases between what is the public and the private sector logic regarding those topics. In the sense that we will not watch some sort of full deglobalization, but definitely the search for resilience to shocks, something that was first sparked by Fukushima, and definitely the pandemic has brought in, will lead to certainly a review. From the private sector logic, it may be limited. Maybe in some supply chains, you will only have the piling up of inventories along the value chain. You may have, in some cases, it makes sense, duplication of points in the value chains and so on. Whereas from the public policy standpoint, we will see definitely the search for resilience and national security trying to move the needle. It comes to my mind, President Macron's first speech during the pandemic in 2020, when he referred to the need to review, to reapproach the strategic sectors. Of course, where to draw the line will be up to each different country and so on. But the fact of the matter is that in some sectors, we definitely know that the search for resilience and national security will reconfigure the global value chains. Comes to my mind, semiconductors, medicaments, and medical equipment. Definitely, we will see some sort of a globalization in the sense that at the margin, we will retrocess when it comes to global value chains in some segments. The pandemic also brought in a spurt, a push towards digitalization, and this will probably accentuate some previous trends regarding reshoring of components of parts, links of the global value chains. This discussion on the technological trends has been, let's say, has received a new boost with the push towards digitalizing processes that we have seen as a result of the pandemic. Second component of the overlapping shocks, war in Ukraine, leading not only to food and energy shocks, but also highlighting the importance of some key minerals, particularly for the energy transition. It comes to my mind, the neon gas produced by Ukraine and Russia, which is, I understand, an important component for the lasers in semiconductors. It comes to my mind as well, the fertilizers and the way by which the energy price have affected them, since part of the fertilizers are produced using energy, using gas. And the energy transition will obviously bring to the fore the relevance of so many new components, cobalt and all the minerals. So my point is that in this overlaps with the other shock, the other almost apocalyptic shock of the plague, the war, bringing geopolitics into the configuration of global value chains, and including with respect to the provision of and production of key minerals. And to complete the apocalyptic combination, we also have seen extreme weather events in a higher frequency. And this has affected harvests and food supply. It has also affected the energy transition, since since it has, well, they are overlapping all these shocks because they combine and reinforce each other. And obviously, to complete the apocalyptic configuration, we will see hunger in many parts of the world. We are already seeing it as a result of the shocks. So it's a new configuration, and this will bring implications both from the private perspective of the managers of the value chains, but also when it comes to public policies trying to affect the configuration. Now, second issue suggested in the program, what are the implications of this for regional development? You know, the new fashion of nearshoring, friendshoring. Friendshoring is kind of it lacks content, but anyway, it's nearshoring, reshoring, and so on. You guys can imagine, having been where I have been, how often I've been asked about those. There's even a sort of a fever in the region, in Latin America and the Caribbean, about dreaming with piggyback on those shocks in order to increase, to delocate components or links of value chains to the region. But let me highlight that this is no falling from heaven, easy cake to get, because there are some preconditions for the region, or any region in that regard, to grab a piece of that division of value chains in the world. I had the opportunity to write a short piece for the Project Syndicate together with Justin Lin, a former colleague, chief economist of ex-chief economist of the World Bank, and another young Chinese economist, Pepe Zhang, on what would take for those things to happen. And let me highlight, well, at least a couple of them. First, without sustained improvement in domestic fundamentals, including macroeconomic stability, regulatory and legal certainty and simplicity, physical infrastructure, education and skills, productivity and innovation, and export promotion and facilitation, the interest by investors in going towards this will be modest and short-lived, as we discussed yesterday. Second point, the governments must be realistic and need to be precise in picking winners. Ron aptly remarked the need to have capacity on the government side, on the policy making, so for anything of this to work. So the governments will have to rely on careful assessments of true, existing, or latent comparative advantage. Third, regional integration remains a powerful tool for galvanizing trade and broader economic competitiveness, and as well as openness and standard setting. I would say that the Asian-led, for instance, RCEP, which entered into force this year, it represents an important milestone toward harmonizing the spaghetti ball of free trade agreements in Asia. And well, at the same time, hopefully, we hope that Biden's government is able to include better market access in the proposal that President Biden brought to Asia, because that's what we need. When we talk about regional integration, that must encompass the harmonization of clauses, of regulations, and so on. And the region needs, Latin America and the Caribbean needs to do something about this, because otherwise, forget about enjoying benefits of nearshoring or friendshoring. Fourth, in addition to drawing on valuable lessons from the old industrial policy playbook, that is to say, not making the same mistakes, the government should pay close attention to the new opportunities and challenges. I refer to digitization of cross-border trade, specifically in software and business processes, because they're lowering entry barriers and reducing the cost of scaling for entire export sectors. And attention as well on carbon border adjustment mechanisms. And finally, just to complete, the forward-looking policy making will require answering some tough questions beyond politics and geopolitics. In the short and medium term, is reshoring or nearshoring really the big opportunity that some experts claim, or should governments focus on other priorities? In the longer term, what type of industrialization and trade policy will be most beneficial and future-proof? So finally, on the national policy for GVCs, several important points have been made since yesterday. Instead of relying on market reservations and or similar competition shunning policies, as Professor Keun has showed clearly to be at the base of the failures of Malaysia in the past, the national policies regarding global value chains have to be thought of as crowding in and not replacing what is to be done by the private agents. What matters most is the structure of incentives, rewarding winners and penalizing losers that must accompany any national policy regarding global value chains. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Otaviano. Thank you. So we will go to the last statement, Professor Lee, Jeong-Dong Lee.
Yeah, last but not least, and my discussion is slightly in line with Ron's comment, and I expected Ron has been very much optimistic about the specialization policy because he provided a theoretical foundation of the policy. I was surprised. And I want to take the ecosystem policymakers' perspective. So we wanted to have the ecosystem evolution, and ecosystem evolution means to have a new activity of one ecosystem. And for for this 1.5 days, we discussed about what type of activity or knowledge and sectors do we need to make a smart specialization, or in more general terms, diversification. So basically, we have discussed about for what? For what? Maybe Ron's framework based on relatedness and complexity might help a lot. And also we discussed about the long-term stylized patterns of ecosystem evolution out and out. So yeah. in out, yeah. So, but relatively little attention has been paid to how. So-called implementation issue. For this how issue, I need to discriminate two different patterns of stylized diversification. The first one is very much gradual and related diversification, such as if the region is focused on farming, and then we can diversify to smart farming or natural resources. Yeah, we can go to processed materials, metals, and so on. So it's a related diversification. So in this case, we know the route to go there. And also we may have some benchmarking cases, which means we know the answer. In this case, we need a big betting strategy. And so in this case, the economic textbook tells us that there is very important sources of market failure in this case. so-called coordination failure. Everybody knows the answer. We need to go there. We need to have a smart farming. But everybody should move together at the same time. It's called coordination. But quite often it is very difficult to make coordination among different interest groups. So in this case, government should have bold plan and then big betting and then make a one-shot, one-kill project. But on the other hand, we have another type of diversification, so-called disruptive and unrelated diversification. So every region try to have fourth industrial revolution, AI, and real bio, and quantum computing, and so fancy items. So, for example, in Korea, even for the last couple of years, a large number of provinces try to get subsidy from central government, and then most of the items focused on AI and automotive driving and so on. So fancy items, regardless of their relatedness. So in this case, they do not know the answer, and we don't have any good benchmarking cases because they are fancy. So in this case, the strategy should not be betting and shot one kill, but instead we should take more small betting, small steps. And for the first case, gradual diversification, we need to move very fast. Speed matters. But in the unrelated, disruptive diversification, we need to be persistent, to accommodate, try and error, to see the answer, because nobody knows the answer. And in this case, another source of market failure applies. Information failure. Nobody knows the information. So in this case, we need the keyword of try and error. And we have a large number of PhD students and postdoc researchers who are trying to make their own research. And for you, I have some brief recommendation. And to get Nick, I'm the editor of the Science and Public Policy, and I'm in charge of the regions from Far East, South, the Asia, to Middle East, Iran, and so on. And I got many submissions from, especially from mainland China. Many manuscripts. Maybe I can say too many. But most of them focuses on provincial level comparative analysis. China has 32 provinces, and then 32 provinces have different policies. And it makes a semi-experimental, social experimental situations. And so they try to compare with successful cases and failed cases and so on. And I think at the province level, Brazil has also so many sub-regional the units. So why not? Maybe as China, Brazil may have very much rich information in terms of experimentations. So I strongly encourage you to do that. And as Ron mentioned, there has been already 200 projects in Europe, and based on the experimentation, a large number of research has been done. So why not in Brazil? We can see more beautiful researches, evidence-based research from your side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee. We have a good 50 minutes, 45 minutes for discussion here. So I want to invite everyone in this room and everyone online. People are on YouTube, people are on Zoom. They can ask questions. But before, I would like to see if the panelists here, we have 6 excellent panelists here. each one better than the next. If they want to react to somebody else's comments first, do you have any reaction to someone else's comments? Sure.
So let me, I got some further thought after listening to what Canuto said about this changing GVC to this pandemic. We have not much this issue or impact of pandemic in this 1.5 day session. So from our Jeong-Dong, he talked about knowing, doing. Knowing is like innovation system, and doing is GV production. So we have to consider what's going on in terms of GVC after this pandemic. I see that we are going into big change GVC, as mentioned by reshoring or nearshoring or friendshoring. These are important new phenomena we have to consider. And I think there are three main vectors which is affecting reorganization of GVC. First is COVID-19 situation. Second is digitalization, which makes factory become smarter without relying much on labor cost. Thirdly, the upgrading of China. China wage rate become higher and higher, so no more attractive sites for doing labor-intensive production in China. So those are changing global GVC, such as including some company exiting from China, going back to their home or going to Vietnam or South Asian countries. Those are nearshoring. So I think we need to also consider this aspect of GVC. So if more about reshoring, that means combination of knowing and doing, combination of innovation and production happening in the same places. Whereas it used to be separate into between innovation is done home, production is done overseas, but now it is being putting together in the same places. That's the reshoring. So these are important issues. We can have many things consider about this new phenomenon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the panel?
Yes. As a matter of fact, there is a question in terms of the very core of a policy for regions and ecosystems is how to attract the attention of the stakeholders. Because when we deal, for example, with government in a city or in a state, obviously, as Ron did with Europe, I'm doing that with Brazil and my countryside. It's a little bit my backyard and what I know. But when we talk about it with government, I think we miss the words to attract their attention, because they are hearing a lot of ecosystems here, smart specialization there, regions and so on. But as a matter of fact, what is concrete? For example, in a region such as mine in the south of Brazil, what is, and this is very much to see with the kind of work you are doing, because I have to have an X-ray of what the things that we have. Because if I pick a little bit what each one of us has thought, this is a little bit, I start saying that relations matters. Do we have relations? Enough? Size matters. Do we have size for this? Specialization matters. Do we have something that we can specialize, especially in, sorry about the specialize, especially in terms of this revolution? We know that knowledge matters. What kind of knowledge do we have? And finally, coordination matters. Is it possible to coordinate in such a way all these features to have a region? So how to attract the attention of the stakeholders, what to say to government, to companies, to universities, and every one else that matters to having an ecosystem. This is what I'm concerned about.
Very good. I see nobody else is hand up. The floor is. Who? Canuto. All right.
But yeah. Just to complement, Professor Keun has not highlighted, but I do on his behalf, his piece that came out on Project Syndicate on Monday of this week about the Chinese trajectories regarding semiconductors. It's a very important piece, among other reasons, because he outlines the multiplicity of possible policy paths for China, depending on the attitude taken by the US with respect to the access to the US market. This is a pure example of how geopolitics is part of the configuration of value chains and technological trajectories. It's a important piece. Thank you.
Thank you. And this was a great comment, actually, because economists have often, the last 2 decades, but the last 2 decades, we just forgot the geopolitics. We went all for efficiency. And now we understand that actually governments matter. They really matter. They can mess things up. They can mess everything up. So, okay, so the floor is open for questions. Do we have anyone in the room? Any
Thank you.
It's working.
Okay, better now? All right, thank you very much for your statements. It's something for you guys to react concerns individual agency in this context. Because I've been working with a regional government in Brazil, in the state of Ceará, and they have been trying to implement some sort of smart specialization initiative. And they have been failing to address the entrepreneurial discovery process because they basically didn't have any, and they tried to implement it top down, which is against the very rationale of the smart specialization, right? So that's one of the discussions I had with them, is that maybe they should have a identify why agents don't connect in the first place. And that leads us to a very complicated issue, which is individual or entrepreneurial agency. So how do you get these individuals to collaborate, to connect? And that's not, I don't see just as a policy target. I think there are deeper cultural issues behind this. And I wanted to see how you reacted to this perception. Thank you. Is it, yeah. There's no light, but it works. Yeah, good. No, I think that's a very important issue. I think what I think is very interesting in the current literature is that there is increasing attention to the role of agency in ecosystems, right? And who can be kind of decisive of bringing together actors. So. You're right. I mean, I can tell you about many experiences in especially peripheral regions in Europe, where we try to involve local stakeholders. Either they didn't show up, and if they showed up, they were always telling us, okay, but what is my incentive, right? To come here and to spend my precious time. on this kind of meetings. So you have to think carefully about, okay, how you can make local players interact more. I think there are some good results from cluster policy experiences in France, for example, in which there have been just a number of cluster policy in France is big. It's massive investment in developing clusters, and especially the focus on trying to increase interaction between local actors. And they have been very successful in doing that. There are a few studies that have been really well done, policy evaluations, and they all tend to show that indeed this type of policy work in making local actors interact more, and it also generated more output in terms of patenting, in terms of innovation, more in general. So that is the good story to tell. But there are some places. For example, I worked for the Monti government in Italy in 2014, together with Barca, the Minister of Regional Development, Territorial Development in Italy. And then we had a number of cases in the south of Italy, and there, yeah, as you said, there's a type of culture in which there is no much collaboration going on at all, right? So they don't see what it can bring to them, and there's just not that attitude in making this happen. So that is very hard to break. So I have no solution to that, but I think you don't have to give up about those territories, but still try to involve some key actors that might make a difference, right? That are already kind of connected, and make them involved, and that could already be a good starting point. But it's a difficult issue that is not easy to solve.
So, if I'm right, you touched slightly complex issue of attitude and cultural background. So I should be very careful, but there is a relationship with culture and institutional settings to but there is a reverse knowledge from innovation to attitude. So, for example, we have some kind of very good image in terms of innovative cultures regarding about Germany or Japan or Silicon Valley and so on. But those images has been created very recently. And for Korea, we are very famous for Pali Pali, fast. And then we spend, even for me, we spend only 10 minutes for lunch. Pali, fast. So everybody knows in the world, yeah, Korea is very famous for Pali Pali. But this culture has been created only in centuries, just the starting of the industrial development. So my point is that we should pay more attention on the reverse product by having more activity, new generations, and then we can have a big impact to change of the culture.
So a question for everyone, but I will begin the question by a suggestion from Professor Jeong-Dong. The idea to look for regions. Okay, you Brazilians look to China. China has lots of different regions. You in Brazil have lots of different regions. Try to go to experiments. Great idea. That's the. So then the question is about these experiments. suggestions and lessons from you all. Probably Marcia and Otaviano could talk more about the difference. First part of my question, there are differences in the levels of development from the different regions in Brazil. Very, very big difference. As you've seen, remember Mariane Françoso's regions, center, periphery, and intermediate. So the question is how to think about those experiments, thinking about the different starting points. A region in the state of São Paulo is something, Minas Gerais is another, Pernambuco is another, and so on and so forth. So I believe that especially you that study more China know about different experiments in different regions from different per capita GDP. And so what are the difference to think about those experiments? And this leads me to a paper from Professor Keun that I like very much. Is Professor Keun's suggestion for what to do with North Korea. So if I read it right, you have to do in North Korea is just the policies that China did in Fujian, the province. So the idea to learn something done in China to the idea for a development program for North Korea in the case of reunification of the Koreas. That hope happen soon. So this could be something that to an idea. Why not to is that experiment to do in some regions in Brazil, something like that. That's the point. That's it. So that I think that we should learn, and of course, I think that Ron has lots to think because he ended his presentation talking about peripheral in Europe. So now how to dynamically probably there is a dialogue between the peripheral regions in Europe and some of the regions in China and in Brazil. So that's and the Brazilians in the table. I know that they have lots of ideas, but let's first listen for the experiments in those different countries.
For the case of China, I know there's a big difference in terms of development level within the across provinces in Brazil, but not that much compared with China. Compared with China, the big difference between East and West. Totally different. Maybe bigger than in Brazil. But they have, so because of that difference, they have different results of the same policy. For example, a large number of provinces try to develop new energies, so-called wind and solar and so on, but different performance. So based on that kind of research, the researchers come to analyze the regions and so on. So still, I believe, still we can have many examples of policies at the province level to compare in practice. Yeah, I believe. And for the case of North and South Korean case, only have a case.
The Fujian province just opposite to the Taiwan. So China thought that Fujian should learn from Taiwan and utilize their capital and to develop. So that means the example of China government to use different policies for different provinces. But in northeastern China, they are supposed to work more with Japan or Korea, whereas in South, Guangdong, work with Hong Kong or many overseas Chinese people in Singapore and others. So
this example of diverse regional policy by Chinese government. So that's actually the size of China. So yesterday we briefly talked about the issue of size, and Tiago, who is sitting over that side, mentioned issues. He sent more feedback to me. His point yesterday was that when I mentioned the resource development strategy, which worked fine in Chile or Malaysia, but Brazil, given huge size, just relying on resource-based sector might not be enough. So I agree. Brazil is a huge potential, a big size. You can try different things together. Like some area try resource-based, some area try manufacturing, or even try high-tech like aerospace and so on. So Brazil should be better positioned in terms of trying different sources of growth in different part of regions.
Deixa. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any questions online?
Yeah. No. If I may, just to say something on Eduardo's question, I will be very brief. When I referred myself on regional integration, it wasn't not necessarily inside our country. It's not region northeast vis-a-vis southeast, but particularly the regional integration among countries in South America, or like in the illustration that I did about Asian, the RCEP, and so on. When it comes to Brazil itself, for instance, the basic thing is to make sure that there is physical integration, which you are lagging behind. The IMF made a research recently showing how the lack of investments in roads in Brazil has made Brazil laggard when it comes to travel conditions as compared even to our neighbors, Argentina, Uruguay, and Chile. So Brazil is lagging behind in infrastructure investments in roads and so on. And unless it does something about it, there is no way there will be integration, economic integration, further economic integration in the regions. The same thing applies to policy aspects such as taxes. Brazil has such a multiplicity. Each state has its own tax brackets, at its own levels of taxes and so on. And this makes impossible transactions, or at least make very costly for any company to operate simultaneously in several parts of Brazil. So when it comes to regional integration, there is a homework that needs to be done that has not been done in Brazil. Otherwise, the scale is not such a big source of gains. And on the cross-border side, one needs to have the same kind of harmonization of policies and regulations. And by the way, on China, China is a lab. It's impressive how yesterday we saw in one of the points of in the presentation of Professor Keun was exactly the comparison of different experience in different parts of China with respect to building global value chains and so on. Brazil has also to learn how to mainstream eventual experience. I have in mind, since we had a question from Ceará, right? Ceará is a fantastic example of improvement in education, in the formation of human capital, similar to what happened in Vietnam. Okay, so it's been now many years since the success of Ceará in education has been proved in national exams and so on. Whereas no major effort has been made to mainstream, to generalize the successful experience that Ceará had. So we should do like China does, that allows some experiments to take place and then use the lessons to improve the policies. We are failing in doing so in Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Canuto. Do we have any questions online?
I have a question. I'm online and I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. My question is to Ron Boschma. I just wanted to ask him whether, based on the extensive data you have, patent data on the regions, and this doesn't have to be necessarily European Union regions, are there any two regions that have been successful in one sector and they have followed different trajectories to this success? If you can just give us examples, if you have any. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for your question. Yes, there are many examples that actually, I mean, this is of course the whole principle behind smart specialization, right? That you build on specific capabilities and that allow you to move forward, and that differs from region to region. So the Basque Country, for example, is a very successful case that was able to transform itself from being a port economy that was not alive anymore 20, 30 years ago. And now if you go to the Basque Country nowadays, I mean, it has been very successful in transforming itself, moving into new economic activities that partly built on existing capabilities. But they also, for example, moved into all kinds of cultural activities. The Guggenheim Museum is one of the prime examples, very well known to all of us. So, so that is a very different diversification process than in other areas. I mean, one of the most successful regions in my own country is Brabant, Eindhoven region, right? It's the home base of Philips. But Philips went almost into bankruptcy in the 1980s, and then the region had to reinvent itself. And it was we're using exactly this type of capabilities, and they became now one of the best high-tech centers worldwide. ASML, the company that has been mentioned today, is a very successful company producing machines to produce chips, and they're world market leader. So, and you see, these are very different examples. Regions that were really in a state of crisis and they had to reinvent themselves, but they used their own capabilities to move out of that, and they have been very successful. Part of policy played a part in that transformation process, but there were also entrepreneurs that saw opportunities building on existing capabilities and to move into new activities. So yeah, those are two cases that come into my mind. Very different transformation processes, but both were very successful.
Just to follow up on that, being in the European Union, do you think might have helped with that? Can that be replicated in other parts of the world? Because Basque Country is one of the not very advanced regions of European Union, but have they been learning from other successful regions? Was this knowledge passed on to them? Being in the European Union helped a lot. Would you say so?
Yeah, because there are huge European programs to enable this type of transformation processes, and especially the Basque Country have been very successful in getting access to all kinds of European funds. I think it's now a prime example of high quality of governance that is an example to many regions elsewhere in Europe. So they have created an ecosystem in which many local stakeholders are involved. I think it has been heavily studied because of that, and so they had a very strong institutional learning capacity, and they improved over time. So that was it's quite a remarkable achievement, given the fact that they were in a kind of state of crisis in the 1980s and to some extent in the 1990s. Yes, very remarkable. Europe provide those type of opportunities, but of course, it's always a kind of downside of Europe is that it exists of many European countries, right? So we tend to forget that when we compare Europe with China or the US, right? So there are many countries in Europe, as you know, and it's not always easy to ensure that they all follow the same line of reasoning and the same type of policies. So that's a challenge to make it happen now.
Very good.
There is some comment in the question box. Yes, some question regarding Canuto.
Yes. On the Brazilian economy perspectives in the landscape of friendshoring GVC reconfiguration, even in areas we have comparative advantage such as agriculture, since there are so large dependencies on both non-aligned sides. Yes. Well, trying to give my take on this. Definitely, for the interest of any individual emerging market economy, middle-income country like Brazil, it's important not to align automatically with any of these two sides and try to get the maximum of the rivalry between the major poles. See, the Chinese come with the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, and then we turn to the Americans and say, what do you have as an alternative to this? And it comes to pressures on what to do with respect to auctions in 5G, and we say, come in all and compete for having access to the Brazilian market. We have to have this attitude. The second point to make is that we have to be more trade open. Brazil is a very closed, commercially speaking country. Among its peers, it only beats Argentina in terms of closeness of trade. We have high tariffs, we have non-trade barriers. The proportion of exports and imports to GDP, even considering the size of Brazil and its geographical location, it can be shown. I have done this with colleagues using gravitational models, that Brazil is more closed trade speaking than the other peers. So in the successes of Brazil are the confirmation of how being closed does not help. When we think of the examples of success in Brazil, you think of Embraer and the Brazilian production of planes. Embraer is the hub of a value chain. And for that to work, it is able to import whatever it wants from whatever it needs, engines from France, from Dassault, things from components from Korea and so on. And Embraer is a success because of that, because it focused on what it does well, which is design planes and build planes. Another success, the Brazilian agriculture, exactly the same model. Another example, WEG Motors, that not by chance is operating now in more than 50 countries. Another example, the oil company, Petrobras, at least until it was submitted to local content requirements. Before that, Petrobras was on the top ranking of oil companies able to explore, to research and explore deep sea in a very competent way, competing with the Norwegians, competing with the Dutch and so on. And why is that? Because Petrobras before was able to focus on research and production and was able to import whatever it needed from the best place. So I guess these exceptions to the Brazilian lack of manufacturing competitiveness are exactly exceptions that confirm the rule. The Brazilian manufacturing industry and everything else pays a huge price for its closeness, for the stupidity of closed trade policies. So what we need to do in terms of, we need to integrate. Brazil is not in GVCs. Our option has been to establish domestically dense networks of production. Okay, Brazil does the car as a whole, but then it's, let's say, the productivity is lower, the quality of the product is lower, and the country is not able to compete. So we have to, given the GVC configuration, more than ever, be able to abdicate some links in our value chains so as to be able to integrate. Brazil is not integrated. The whole globalization, the whole revolution of GVCs has happened without Brazil embarking on it. And that's the point. So openness and no alignment, I would choose as response to your question, Valeria. Thank you.
Yeah, the realization actually of this point, Otaviano, is exactly why our program exists. This program exists exactly because FAPESP realizes that the institutions here are fairly close. So they brought somebody from abroad who knew very, very little about Brazil, just exactly to open up some university and link it with that. Not that it was closed completely, but it was not open enough. It's still not open enough. One of my big complaints in this department, and I will say now in front of the students here, is that everybody who walked into my office for a dissertation, they wanted to do a dissertation on Campinas or on São Paulo. This is absolutely unacceptable. Campinas is a very important city. São Paulo is a very important state. However, there is the world out there. And when we go into dissertation, we actually look at the world. We don't look at Campinas. Nobody in Washington came to my office to do a dissertation on Washington. No, nobody. There.
That's the same problem. But this is a size of our visions.
Huh? No? Ah, really? They have internet sort of. Okay, that's good. Okay. But it is a battle. I mean, I tell you as a foreigner, right? I mean, I understand completely what Otaviano says. The country is completely closed. Okay.
Just want to add a comment briefly. Proximity is an important aspect for science innovation, as we know. However, proximity can also present a negative impact on innovation due to the problem of lock-in. That is lack of opens and flexibility and so on. How do you assess that component of proximity in the post-COVID world? I think it's important because just we are talking about FAPESP, so proximity is an important issue, I guess.
It might be
depending upon the sectors or nature of knowledge regime. In other words, where knowledge is more explicit, codifiable like IT, proximity less matter, whereas sectors with more tacit knowledge like machineries or component, the proximity might be matter to diffuse the tacit knowledge, which require the person-person interaction or dialogue and so on. So depending upon types of sectors or types of knowledges. Also, proximity can be a non-linear, like it's not simple linear relationship, but it can be a non-linear or some more complicated.
Yeah, it depends a bit, I would say, what proximity you're talking about. To me, there are different forms of proximity. All proximities have the bias have a bias to locking, right? So if you social proximity is the same. If you always work with the same people, with the same partners, with the same researchers, at some point of time you will fail to bring to develop new ideas. The same for geographical proximity, the same for cognitive proximity, right? So we can collaborate perfectly because we are working in the same discipline. But at some point of time, maybe you have to make crossovers between different disciplines. Sometimes you have to make crossovers between regions. Sometimes you have to not go and collaborate with the usual suspects, but widen your horizon. I think that is the way to overcome locking processes, and there have been a lot of research on this, looking at networks, research networks, and how they operate, but also for regions, right? So has been discussed here, right? If you only rely on local relationships, that might not work in the long run. So you have to open up, you have to expose yourself to new things. And try to make sure that you get out of your own networks now and then, get out of your own discipline now and then, make crossovers. That is the way to avoid lock-in processes, because there's a tendency of lock-in all the time. Because for us, it is very natural to work with those that are in the same region, to work with those that are in your same department, to work with those that are working in your same discipline, etc., right? And so, and therefore there's a need to go beyond that now and then in order to avoid these lock-in processes. So it applies to many proximity dimensions, and I think you have to take them all into account in order to have a comprehensive answer to this question.
Right. Perhaps one more question, and then we will have closing statements. Is there any remaining question here or online? Okay, so we will go around the table for closing statements. What? The what?
Oh, Nick, can I have just one more question from online platform?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. My question is about Professor J.D. Lee's point on entrepreneurial universities to improve local capabilities. So the universities as knowledge sources to link with the industry locally and help them improve. You said that in your speech today. In the backward regions, those universities set up, they have a lot of difficulties to connect with the firms because their capabilities aren't really strong enough. So the firms complain that they can't really get much from these universities, and then these universities end up being machines for delivering, grades to undergrad and postgrad students. So what would you be then recommending? How can these universities be strengthened? Because we see in quite well developed regions, good universities building these links, they have spin-offs, they create startups and everything, and also connections with different tier of companies, but it's not happening in backward regions. So what can be the way to improve, strengthen these kind of universities and help them to connect to the locals? Thanks.
Maybe I can share one episode of Soulmate University. That might be I'm not sure what to answer. 5 years ago, or no, 2015, Soulmate University picked one center called SMU Engineering Consulting Center. And traditionally, SMU tries to make a very top-notch journal articles. So it's very difficult for local firms to meet SMU faculty members because there's too much difference. And in order to make a bridge, we made the consulting center, and then in the consulting center, the local companies, small and medium-sized enterprises, just log in, and then they put their questions, engineering questions, and coordinators they review in the first stage, and then make a match with the appropriate faculty members, and then it became really very helpful, both sides. So for the faculty members, they had a chance to understand the real world problem, and also the SME CEOs had a very good chance to talk with the knowledgeable members. And we accumulated some successful cases, and then government knew that. And then about 2 years later, government started to make a support program. So if SME logged in, and then if the match is made, and the government support with a kind of a matching fund. So now it became quite successful, and then maybe SME engineering try to diversify, spin off that consulting center, even within the SMU territory, but have more separate and independent authority. That might be one way, I think.
In other words, we need some innovation in innovation policy.
I had so there's one point I want to mention. The idea came from my side because I was at the time the associate dean, and then I created my name on that.
Yeah. So I had a student actually who asked in the dissertation, should the innovation policy be innovative? Yeah, that was a good question. So let's go around the table and online, of course, for closing statements. Huh?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, and the reflection is that I think it is exactly that. If we keep discussing innovation policy in the same way that we have been discussing from the last 30 to 40 years, we'll do always from the top-down point of view. We discuss the macro, we get a little bit at the meso when we discuss sectors and regions and so on, but I'm very much concerned about the micro. Is it possible to pick a very successful case from elsewhere and bring it here if we don't have the same level of capabilities of stakeholders in the individual point of view? That's something that I'm concerned. So we perhaps may think on how to make a sort of a bottom-up innovation policy, something different in that way. So when we have the specificities of the region, I'm thinking in terms of a region, in terms of which kind of knowledge, which level of knowledge circulation we have, what is the pre-existence, what are the features of this context that allows us to think on this or about that in terms of a policy, and not the contrary, because at least in Brazil, the last 30 years, I know that we are lacking of development, industrial and innovation policy. But the last 30 years, we have been doing it top down. We are rarely thinking from the bottom up point of view. Let's try something different in this point of view. Innovate in the innovation policy. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Yeah, we can follow the table. Yes, yes. Go ahead.
Worldwide, I believe this group of people, very young researchers and also scholars, is very unique. Very good collection of very good human resources. And while for the last two days, I had contact with young scholars, and I found out that this topic that they have in my mind is very up to date, very fashionable. So I expect a great report emerge in the near future, and I will try my best to cite your great research when I write a paper.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So great. As the last word, I'd have to say again, given huge size of a project, you can try diverse methods of regional or economic development, such as not only bottom-up or entrepreneurial discovery type, but also like a top-down or planned approach too. As I mentioned yesterday, in the case of Chile, the salmon berry, not the original Chilean product. I mean, the salmon used to be not in the Chilean Sea, and the blueberry is a totally new product done by scientific methods. So, such the top-down approach can also apply in the context of project, because yesterday we also heard about presentation by Mariana about the possibility of inequality persist. In other words, backward region has smaller chance, whereas strong region has a more chance in the future. So we have to overcome such possibility of inequality persist. So to do that, we did not only this bottom-up, also top-down approach. In other words, and in the case of Korea, as Jeong-Dong mentioned, we did more top-down approach than bottom-up. So there is a city called Wonju in Korea. We developed medical industry cluster there, and this region has no experience with doing medical stuff. So there are so many cases of this top-down, which creating something out of nothing. So I think Brazil has huge resources. You can concentrate research in certain area, and so you can do something. So in a sense, again, the diverse approach can be applied in the context of the huge country like Brazil, rather than just one location.
Thank you. Ron.
Yes, I also want to end up with an optimistic note, right? So because my opening statement was kind of depressing, right? But it was also a bit provocative, of course, to stimulate the discussion. Now the concluding, I think what at least I want to do and I want to contribute to is I don't want to hide all those implementation problems, right? We have to learn from it in order to improve the policy. But you first have to identify those and find a common agreement on what is going well and what is not going well in order to improve. I think that is extremely important. I think what is also needed, apart from indeed connecting the top-down and bottom-up process and aligning them, I think what is also very important is I want to understand also the language of politics. And I'm not entirely sure whether I fully understood how they, what their logic actually is. I'm not talking about Trump or whatever. I don't want to understand this person, but you know what I mean. And so public administrators, how they think, how policy actually operates in practice, what kind of motives, what kind of argumentations are being developed, in order to connect it more to our type of world, so, you know, when we talk about policy, and to be useful for them, because that is what is the ultimate question. Of course, is we want to improve policy because we want to improve societies, and I think the logic of politics need to be understood in order to make that happen. So at least my own strategy in that respect is to work much more with political scientists and planning people that actually know more about that, but of course also to interact with policymakers, because that is also a trial and error process in order to understand what it is in their minds in order to be more useful to them. So I think that is also something that we should take up and try to incorporate also in our future research. Okay, and that is an optimistic. So let's work on that. All right.
That's useful. Thank you. Marcia, any closing statement?
Are you listening to me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be in this round table. And for me, the lesson is the importance for her to have the coordinated policy, not only innovation policy, but also education and infrastructure and commercial and policy to achieve these different goals. And these goals are different from different regions and different locals. And also that we need regional and local policymakers capacity to do that, not only from federal government, but also this local policymaker, how to engage them in this big task. That's it, Nick. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Marcia. And Otaviano.
Yes. Very, very briefly, thank you for having me here as well, and congratulations on the whole event. If I could suggest a takeaway of my own is the following. The multiple overlapping shocks that have reconfigured the environment for global value chains and for regional ecosystems is full of new challenges and so on. But at the same time, more than ever, the old agenda to be followed by any developing country remains the same. That is to say, making sure that you have provision of education, skills, infrastructure, and a business environment that it does not become a toll over the transactions among agents. Otherwise, there is no value chain that can operate. And basically, the importance of cherry picking well by governments on what activities and where to provide support. So the same challenge brought in by the multiple shocks will also bring opportunities. Individual countries may benefit from the competition between the two poles. Thank you and congrats again.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we close this round. A big applause. They are all friends and colleagues, but as somebody mentioned, they had to travel a long way to be with us these 2 days. And actually, they will be with us tomorrow also. And tomorrow we will be co-hosting the event with Professor Marcia there on the top at the University of Sao Paulo. So you may want to visit FAIR, the institute, and we will continue on similar things. But tomorrow it will be more of we will have a strong business component. So the first part of the day, of the morning, it will be business oriented. Okay, thank you very much. We conclude the first 2 days. Thank you for being with us. See you tomorrow.
A good one.